All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for Retain Ohio's second webinar. I am Nicole Abramovich, Research Coordinator for Retain Ohio in the Cincinnati area. During today's presentation, closed captioning is enabled, and if you do wish to disable this feature, you are able to do so. The Q&A and chat will be monitored, so please feel free to add any questions or comments there to join us in our discussion. So with me today, as Dina introduced herself, I have Dina Zidian, the Referral and Enrollment Supervisor with Retain Ohio, and Rachel Zoky, Certified Professional Ergonomist with VelocityEHS. And from here, I would like to invite Dina to come off mute and just give a brief update on Retain Ohio.
Thank you, Nicole. So as many of you may be aware of, we have now entered into being a program and no longer a study for Retain Ohio. So that means that any employee that you have that enters the program will receive all services. And employers, of course, you're more than welcome to take advantage of our other services that we provide to you as well. Currently for the study, or gosh, I have to stop that, for the program, we have over 4,500 patients / employees enrolled. Again, we are in the Toledo, Youngstown, and Cincinnati regions. And past study results showed that most of our employees that do enroll in the program are usually coming from an orthopedic injury or illness that occurs outside of work, of course. Next slide.
Thanks, Dina. And now I would like to introduce our guest, Rachel Zoky, if you'd like to go ahead and take the screen from here.
Sure. So now it's my turn to play around with share screen. Here. All right, can you see my presentation okay?
We can.
Awesome. All right. So welcome, everyone. So the topic of this presentation is the value of implementing an ergonomics process. So just a little bit about myself. So like Nicole said, my name is Rachel Zoky. I am a certified professional ergonomist, and I am the senior strategic consultant with VelocityEHS. So just a little bit about our company real quick. VelocityEHS is a software as a service company. We provide a whole suite of different softwares focusing on all of the core areas of environmental health and safety, or ESG, which is environmental social governance. So my focus is industrial or non-office ergonomics. I am the membership chair for the American Society of Safety Professionals Ergonomics Practice Specialty. And I've been in this field for a little over 7 years, but my degree is a Bachelor's of Science in Industrial and Systems Engineering from The Ohio State University. So I come from the perspective of human factors and engineering when it comes to ergonomics. So today I'm going to talk a little bit first off of what is ergonomics, because it's become a bit of a buzzword for some people. So some people have varying ideas of what that is. We'll go over the benefits of an ergonomics process, tips for implementation, and then give you some recommendations on tools to optimize the benefits of your ergonomics process. So to get started, I think I'm going to launch a poll here, and I just want to get an idea from all of you listening in. What is ergonomics? Can you, on a scale of 1 to 5, how familiar are you with ergonomics, either as a term or as a field?
Nicole, when you're ready, you could go ahead and share those results.
Yeah, I do like the honesty here. Rachel, are you able to see the results?
Not yet.
Okay. So we have a couple people did vote for the ergo what. The majority of the people with 45% stated they have some awareness about it. About 27% stated about the training and skills, and 22% indicated that they're aware of the skills and experience of it. No ergo
Okay.
masters yet.
No ergo masters. Fair enough. All right. So since we don't have any, oh, there we go. Now I can see the results. Cool. Awesome. So this is actually really common, especially in today's business. More and more people are becoming aware of ergonomics, at least cursory. So let's jump into what is ergonomics. So I love this definition because it kind of takes that holistic approach, but it's a bit high level. So ergonomics is a continuous improvement process to design for what people do well and design against what people don't do so well. So what we have to focus in on there is, what do people do well? So when it comes to the work that we design, that we do every day, there are certain pros and cons for people, right? There are things that people do really well, and there are things that equipment and technology does really well. So for instance, technology, machinery, they're really good at doing repetitive tasks, right? You can program a computer to run code and it will keep running that code over and over. It doesn't vary because that's how, that code runs. People, however, we're good at being flexible, right? We are very adaptable. So if something's a little out of skew, we can adapt to that situation and compensate for those little gaps. That being said, there are certain situations where we perform at our best, right? And we want to be optimizing human performance. So if you see the picture on the side, here is an example. You can see, this operator is reaching across the conveyor line to pick up more of these boxes that are going to get put into a larger carton for prepping for shipping. Now, down this line, there's going to be a machine that's going to take this carton that's already filled and it's going to close it up, because you have those things can be really easily done by machinery, right? But if we're trying to optimize human performance in this area, so there's some things to consider, right? So if you look at his posture when he's doing this job, he has to reach all the way across the conveyor to grab this box, right? So if my arm is all the way out here and I'm doing any kind of forceful task, am I in the optimal posture to be performing work? And this is where we can look at this graph. So this is a graph showing, so on the y-axis, it's our ability to generate strength, right? And on the x-axis, it's the degree of elbow extension. So it's the degree that that elbow is moving, right? So you can see between 60 to 90 degrees, right? That's where we're really kind of hitting that upward curve. But at the top of that, it drops off pretty quickly, right? So if we're optimizing our human performance, we want to be optimizing so that that elbow angle is between that 60 to 90 degrees, right? We want to be trying to avoid those situations where that arm is fully extended and we're out past the, that 120, 150 degrees, right? So this is when we're really starting to focus in on considering our humans, our operators, our workers, as we want to optimize them the same way that we would optimize our equipment, right? If you go to an engineer and you're saying, I need a crane to lift these, this equipment into this facility, okay? You're going to optimize based on that crane's abilities, right? So if I need to lift a 200-ton piece of equipment into a facility, that engineer is going to choose a crane that can lift 300 tons at least, right? Because you don't want those to be in conflict. I'm not going to choose a crane that can only lift 100 tons to move this 200-ton piece of equipment. So we need to be treating our human workers the same when we're designing the work, right? We're optimizing for their physical capabilities. So we want to make sure that there's a match there, okay? The other important thing when we talk about ergonomics, it can be considered this kind of, it's a program, it's a one-off, we checked the box, we looked at ergonomics, we thought about it. But actually, ergonomics is a process, and it follows what some of you might be familiar with, the ISO 45001 standard of plan, do, check, act, or DMAIC, right? So it's a process, it's continuous improvement. It's not about assessing every little thing that happens in your facility. It's about identifying opportunities to get better over time, right? So if you have an ergonomics process, or if you're looking to roll out an ergonomics process, you're going to be focusing so that, maybe 1/4 of your time is spent on assessments, and 3/4 of your time should be spent on solutions, on fixes, on making things better, right? Because ergonomics is all about that continuous improvement portion, okay? It's overall, ergonomics is about changing the way you look at work. So I really like to use this example. This is something that we point out, but most of you are probably pretty familiar with the FedEx logo, right? And there was a marketing professional who was honestly quite expert when they designed this, but there's a hidden image within the FedEx logo, okay? And once you see it, you'll probably never be able to stop seeing it. I know once I had a colleague of mine pointed out to me, my eyes, it's what my brain goes to every single time. But if you look between the E and the X, they actually designed this logo so that there's an arrow pointing forward, pointing to the side, right, within this logo. And that's part of that FedEx mantra, right, of moving things forward, right? So what we do in ergonomics is we develop what we like to call them ergo eyes. Basically, so that instead of just walking past the work that's being performed all day, every day, and just saying that's how we've always done it, it's now focusing in on what are some risk factors that are present? What are some things we can do? I bet you I could rearrange some things here. Maybe we have problems and we've just been kind of ignoring them, and we actually want to focus in on addressing them. Okay. So with ergonomics overall, it's that continuous improvement mindset. But what's the real goal? What are we trying to address with ergonomics? And with ergonomics, we're focusing in on work-related musculoskeletal disorders. So it's kind of a big word, but these are disorders related to muscles, nerve, degeneration in the body, basically. Okay, so these are things like carpal tunnel, tendinitis, anything honestly with itis in it, meaning there's inflammation in the body. It's caused by continuous strain of the body, right? So ergonomics is about designing for human capabilities so that all of the people who are working for you can continue to work as long as they want, not as long as their body can hold out, right? So when we talk about doing risk assessments for ergonomics and addressing issues, we have some primary physical risk factors that we focus in on. So those are forceful exertions, awkward postures, and then long durations, high frequencies. The other one that is more environmental, but it has a huge impact in ergonomics, is vibration exposures. So there's a lot of research that's come out recently on how vibration in the body actually acts a bit like radiation. So you know how they say you shouldn't have too many x-rays too close together, right? Because it has a half-life within the body. Vibration acts the same way. So vibration, just because you're not sitting on the old forklift that hasn't been maintained very well and you're shaking all over the place, just because you got off it doesn't mean that the impact of that vibration on your body stops immediately. It actually takes some time for your body to return to normal. Okay, so this is what we're going to be focusing in on when you're doing ergonomics, is to be looking for those occurrences of those high forces and those awkward postures and seeing where you can improve and either reduce the force or move things around so that they can be in the optimal posture for human capabilities. Okay. So benefits of an ergonomics process. So there are a lot of benefits and benefactors. So when it comes to ergonomics, it's kind of like the way that we talk about safety, where everyone has a role related to ergonomics and everyone can benefit from ergonomics, whether that's your investors in increased stock performance, whether that's your quality engineers and improved quality in whatever you're producing, your operational engineers responsible for productivity and bottlenecks, your HR personnel, right, who are responsible for dealing with retention and new hires, training, all of those things, and down to the operators themselves, right, who want to be safe, who want to be able to continue their jobs for as long as they want to, right? And there's a lot of research out there. Honestly, we probably don't need any more studies on the overall benefits of ergonomics because there's so many out there detailing the business benefits of doing ergonomics. So I'll kind of flip through a few to give you an example. And Nicole, remind me, I didn't put it in my notes where the polls are. So if there is a poll, just throw it in there because I honestly, now I can't remember where I put the other two.
Yeah, I'm going to launch it right now. This is the
Perfect. So I talked about some of those key roles, but I'm curious for all of you, what is your company's top driver for change? So you need to make a change. Who's really driving that? Is it safety, productivity, quality? Is it that whole retention, employee engagement piece? I know with job work populations kind of on the decline, that's a big driver for a lot of companies. Or is it just high level stock market performance?
Give it a few more seconds here. Right, we've got the majority of the people.
All right, retention and productivity seem to be their top two. So retention and employee engagement. Yeah, this is a big one. I actually learned recently it costs 20% of the salary to hire a new person, just for the process of hiring a new person. So obviously we want to be retaining all of our existing workers, right? Especially those that have been with your companies for a long time and they're kind of the experts, right? They know so much about how the work is performed and all of the ins and outs, all the tips and tricks, right? We want to be able to retain those people and have them engaged with our company. Super important. And ergonomics is a really good way of retaining them, right? One, it shows that you care about their safety, about their health. You care about them as people because you are trying to fix some of the problems that they've been dealing with. They can be involved in that process. Also, it just, you're making the work safer so that their bodies can perform those tasks for longer. They're not going to be, having to retire early because of degeneration of the back or the shoulder, and they just physically can't work anymore, right? Productivity, no surprise, this is the second biggest one. Obviously, it all comes down to numbers game when it comes to business, right? So ergonomics, I always point out there's a strong link between good ergonomics and improved productivity, which makes sense if you think about if I optimize the tasks so that they are within optimal human capabilities, making them essentially really easy to perform, right? If it's easy to perform, I can do it a lot faster. Right? If it's hard, it's difficult, complicated, it's going to take me more time to perform that task, right? So to that, couple of studies that I'd like to share with you. So this was a study performed on a singular site. And when they implemented a participatory ergonomics process, this is just at their site alone, okay? And I believe it was over the course of a year or so. They saw a 35% reduction in first aid cases, a 75% reduction in long-term sickness absences, 93% reduction in the duration of those long-term absences, so how long people were out, a 50% reduction in modified duty cases. So kind of they came back, but they had to be on modified duty before they could actually get back into their normal jobs. and a 23% reduction in casual absenteeism, right? So again, that engagement, people felt more seen, they felt more heard, right? So they didn't, just take off because they couldn't mentally, didn't want to come into work that day, right? They also saw a huge increase in their the benefits, right? So for the investment cost of a little over $50,000, they were able to show an ROI that was 5 times that in terms of what it saved them overall, whether that's including workers' compensation costs, new hire training, injuries, all of those other costs, right? So, small investment, big benefits, right? Overall, there was, improved employee well-being, right? So if you reduce musculoskeletal disorders, you reduced incident rates, they reduced lost work days and restricted work days. Obviously, that reduces your workers' compensation costs, turnover and absenteeism, and it increases your productivity and your quality, right? So all of this to say, you lower your MSD risk and you improve your worker performance overall. So this was a case study they actually did in partnership with a university to kind of show the impact of the task design on task performance and the injury risk. So you can see these are different, each of these pictures show a different work design, and you can tell the ones that were optimized for the person and how they function best. So basically B, right? It increased their performance significantly, okay? Improved manufacturing performance. So participatory ergonomics interventions show statistically is significant improvements in performance outcomes, right? So, it improves quality, it improves productivity, and on the quality side, if it improves quality, it also reduces the cost to correct those errors. So you can see in these graphs the kind of number of quality errors per risk level. So if the job was classified as low risk, medium risk, or high risk, and you map that onto the quality failures related to that, you can see that those higher risk jobs had the highest quality failure rates. And those were also the jobs that cost the most to correct the quality errors within, right? So all of these reasons are the kind of the business reasons for why it's important to include ergonomics as a process within your company and within your site. So that being said, I have some tips and some recommendations for implementation. Okay, so I believe I have a third poll. I can't remember if it's on this slide or not, Nicole.
I think it's just a couple more.
Okay, perfect. So when it comes to implementing any new process, the first thing you need to understand is your current state, right? In order to know, you have to know knowing where you want to go is great, but you have to know where you're starting off. So one of the recommendations that I have for you is to perform a planned self-assessment or an ergonomics self-assessment. If you don't have anything at your site related to ergonomics whatsoever, well, that's easy. You kind of know that you're starting completely from zero, which hopefully this webinar will inspire you to start building out some of these things. But some of you might have something, whether it's a corporate policy or, someone wrote sometime on ergonomics or a level of understanding of the importance of ergonomics within your company. So performing that self-assessment to kind of figure out where you are in terms of what you already have to work with is really beneficial to that. So along those lines, if you are looking for a free tool to perform a self-assessment, my company actually offers an ergonomics program self-assessment tool. All you do is you answer the questions within each of these segments, and it will produce this kind of radar diagram showing you what areas of the process you are kind of where you are, whether you have more of one area or another. And it will provide you some expert recommendations for improving in those areas where you're falling a little short. You can see that all of the areas on this self-assessment align again with that ISO 45001 kind of key areas. So it does align with those standards for a continuous improvement process, okay? The one thing I'll point out with a self-assessment, it is different than an audit or a gap analysis, right? So an audit is usually done by a third party, completely external to the company. It is by definition impartial. So obviously a self-assessment, you're completing it yourself. There's going to be a little bit of bias in what your results are. So if you're concerned about that, I do recommend you can have multiple people take the self-assessment. And if they're within different areas of your company, whether that's down to, line managers or all the way up to C-suite or VPs, things like that, can kind of give you an idea across your organization how aligned you are on where your status is if you already have an ergonomics program. Okay. Once you kind of know where you are, you want to have a plan to get to that continuous improvement process, right? This is not an easy thing to implement, I will say. It takes a lot of companies, big and small, a serious amount of time to get, to a full process. But there's some key things you can start off to defining in your plan that can set you up for success, okay? So the first is roles and responsibilities. It's really, really important that you define early on who is critical, who are your key stakeholders for an ergonomics process, and what your expectations of them are. Right. Anytime you're rolling out a new process and you're saying, hey, you're going to be part of our new ergonomics team. Cool. What does that mean? Right. What are you expecting me to do? What's the time commitment? What's it going to require of me? So that it's clearly communicated and you have alignment, across your organization on who's responsible for what. Right. Honestly, the next big thing, goals and metrics. Right. So you obviously have to have a goal and you have to have some kind of metrics to be tracking towards that goal. I think it's pretty common. Everyone knows that if it's not being tracked and reported, it's probably not getting done. Right. Metrics are how you build in that accountability and you get buy-in for improvement. So there's so many different metrics out there that you can choose. It'll all depend on what tools or what your goals are. But make sure that those are also clear of what your end goal is and how you're going to track your success throughout the process. And then finally, those process steps, right? So if you're going to be performing risk assessments, setting priorities for where are you going to start? How are you going to decide what improvements to focus on first? What's your process for implementing improvements or implementing change? A lot of companies, they might have a continuous improvement engineer. That is a really key responsibility to be defining in this process because they know how to implement change. But if you don't, you have to have some kind of change management process. So defining early on how that's going to function, who's going to be responsible, all of those things is going to be key for people to actually go ahead and be doing activities with ergonomics, right? So then when we talk about metrics, it's important for your stakeholders to understand that in order to achieve that injury reduction goal, right? In order to get that goal of, fewer injuries and better retention, better productivity, better quality, all of those things, you need to be focusing on reducing risk, not just on, I personally have a pet peeve with the goal of, our goal is 0 injuries, 0 reportables. That does not drive injury reduction. It tends to incentivize people not to report things, which is a bigger issue, right? So we can start off focusing on lagging indicators or the consequences of poor ergonomics, things like injury illness rates, lost work days, injury costs, things like that. That's where a lot of companies start off because that's what the data you have readily available and it's very obvious, right? But you want to be moving in as soon as possible into predictors. So these are those leading indicators that are going to tell you you avoided that injury, you avoided a consequence, right? So things like MSD risk levels, fit to design criteria for ergonomics, observations, just, what risk factors did you observe across the job, right? Process audit results and scores, things like that. Right? These are leading indicators that are predictors that in the future you will probably have an injury related to that. Nicole, is this where my third
I
poll
was
is?
just gonna ask you to kindly stop. Yep.
Nice, I remembered. So we've talked about those metrics. So I want to get an idea from all of you. What type of metrics does your company primarily use to measure success? Is it leading indicators, things like that are predictors, or are you really in that kind of lagging indicator? You only really talk about the consequences of doing things poorly.
Still got a few rolling in. All righty.
Oh, this is great. Okay, so a lot of you do use leading or predictors. Still, pretty not as big of a lead as we would all love to see, I'm sure, but those lagging indicators are still important to track, but this is great. So that shows that you are focusing in on the things to help you avoid the problems in the first place, right? You're focusing in on those predictors. That's great to see. Awesome. So we've talked about those metrics. We've talked about the process and why it's important to launch it. So the next kind of portion of this is gaining buy-in. So hopefully I've encouraged all of you and inspired all of you to really go back to your company and either launch or improve an ergonomics process. The key thing with that is gaining buy-in, right? You need buy-in from your key stakeholders, whether that's your management sponsor, whoever can give you resources and who can assign people to the team to be participants, right? But also you need that buy-in from your workers who you're going to rely on for feedback and information on how the work is performed and what their difficulties are, right? So what are some key things to think about when it comes to gaining buy-in? The first is follow a process. So it seems so silly, but at the same time, people need to have that clear idea of how things are going, right? So if you're saying, hey, workers, when you see an issue related to ergonomics, we want you to let us know, that's great. They need to understand what's the process for letting someone know. Who am I telling this information to? How am I telling this information, right? If management is giving you resources for something, they need to understand what resources you need, how you're going to use them, all of those key process steps, right? The other thing is over communicate. It's so crazy, but it actually takes up to 6 times of repeating yourself before a point can really stick. So say it over and over and over, even if you start to feel like you're being super obnoxious, it means that someone's actually probably remembering what you said, right? And when it comes to ergonomics, that communication piece is really, really important. Involving employees, right? I kind of already said this, but your workers, your operators, your employees, they are the experts on the work that's being performed, right? Anybody who performs a job 40 to 60, even more hours a week, they know that job better than anyone, including the engineer who designed it, right? So they need to be involved in this process. They need to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, be providing feedback on any improvements, especially when it comes to implementing improvements. If you've ever researched change management and good change management practices, the best way to get buy-in from people to try something new is to have them feel like they have some ownership of that change, right? So if they're involved in that process of developing or coming up with the ideas for improvements, they are going to be way more likely to want to try it, right? Because they're going to say, well, this was my idea, and we actually got it through, and we got this new tool, isn't it cool? And I love it. And and they become your champion for success as well, right? So getting them involved at all stages of the process is going to be really, really key. That being said, there has to be that two-way communication, right? So it can't just be you always telling them what you're doing or always telling them to do things. There has to be that feedback loop. So if you provide them with an improvement and you think, oh, this is great, and you just go off and move on to something else, and you don't have a way for them to communicate back with you, oh, this is better, but there's some actual issues with this that maybe we didn't know when we were first going through that design or that change process. They have to be able to communicate back to you feedback on, well, this tool is better, but actually we realized that, because of the orientation or because of the handle, it's actually really hard to grip, or, I have to get into a weirder posture than I thought I would because it impacts something else to do with this process, right? So you need to have that feedback loop. It's also really important to be transparent, right? No one likes feeling like they're being lied to, or that someone's just trying to, sell them a gimmick, right? Be very transparent on what you're doing, why you're doing it. If there are bottlenecks to getting an improvement implemented, make sure you're, again, communicating that with them. If you go out and you do a risk assessment saying, hey, we're going to make this better, we're gathering all this data to make your work better, and then because of resourcing or some other kind of red tape, you don't actually get to implement a change for 6 months or more, you have ruined your credibility with that person, with that employee, right? So make sure you're transparent with them. You're following up saying, hey, we came up with this idea, we really want to do it, but we've got, this bottleneck, or we're still working on it, I promise, but there's this red tape, or whatever that might be, right? So that they continue to feel heard and understood, and that they're aware of what's happening, right? Send the message from the right level. So I'm not sure where everyone is in terms of where they're at level in their corporation, but make sure that the message is being sent from the right level. So if you are launching a continuous improvement process around ergonomics, that needs to come from higher up in the organization, right? Ideally, it's that management sponsor, the person who's providing you resources and holding people accountable. They should be promoting this with you, right? This is if it's a company-wide initiative, they need to be sending that message. You can be reinforcing it and maybe giving details. Make sure that that messaging is not just one person shouting into the abyss, right? It needs to be coming from the right level of authority. Okay. And then lastly, not to say bribery, but personal pleas. So if there is a change that you are trying to implement and someone, really just, they're like, I don't like this, get out of my way, this is my job. Sometimes having that personal relationship with that person and just saying, hey, I get that it's not perfect, and maybe it's not what you were looking for. This is just what we could do for now. Can you please just try it for a week? Try it for 2 days. Try it for a shift. For me, can you do this for me? Can you try? Or, the whole bribery piece of like, if you can do this, if you will give this a shot, I know that I'll be able to, get a better improvement down the road, right? If you can do this and give me feedback, that will really help me to be able to get you what you're looking for down the road. But I need evidence. I need proof of how bad things are to get that resourcing, to get that buy-in, right? All right, so let's talk about some tools to utilize to help you optimize the benefits. There are a lot of tools out there, some of them public. Obviously, my company also has some private tools that we can use, but there are a lot of public tools out there that can help you to start in the process of, evaluating the ergo hazards at within your work, within your company. So the Washington State's Department of Labor and Ideas, they have a whole ergonomics ideas bank. So this tool provides example solutions on, how to correct MSD risks for a variety of industries. So this might be an option. Obviously, we're in Ohio. BWC has a lot of tools within their website, including this, this lifting guidelines tool that they developed in collaboration with OSU. So these can be some great tools to start you off with. Similarly, Lyft, they have, lifting fatigue failure tool. There's a lot of research-based tools that are out there that are free to use for you. That can get you started. If you really want to jump in full fee and you want to subscribe to a license for private tools. So this is an example of our VelocityEHS industrial ergonomics tool. So we use motion capture and AI technology to complete the risk assessment process to help you drive improvement that way. But the point is there's tons of tools out there that you can use right now that are available to you, or if you want to launch it as a bigger overall arching process, you can do that. And so all of these tools can be available to you for whatever level of maturity, whatever level of process you're looking to implement. Okay. So that's all I really had to share and go over with you. So we definitely have time for questions, which is great. If you want to learn more about VelocityEHS, our tools, like I said, we have a whole suite of softwares. We have software for safety, MSDS online. We have environmental compliance, industrial hygiene, all kinds of things. So if you want to learn more about our company, I do have a QR code within the presentation. You can feel free to scan. But other than that, we can open it up to questions if there's any questions that people might have on ergonomics or anything else.
I can ask a question real quick. I don't know if there's any coming in, Nicole. No. Can you touch base maybe a little bit about easy ergonomics, for example, taking more breaks or, changing positions so that they're not always doing a repetitive movement, constantly. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we like to call those our low-hanging fruit improvements, right? Those are the things relatively low cost, but they can have some impacts. So that's when I really like to look at workstation layout is a big one there. So sometimes it's a matter of positioning a cart in a slightly different place, or you evaluate all the shelves on the cart and you find out that one of the top shelf is just too high for the weight of the objects being placed there. And you just say, you know what, we're just not going to use that top shelf, right? No cost to you of just saying, nope, remove a shelf, right? Almost any maintenance person can do that for you, but it can have a big impact on the human, right? We're optimizing performance. So if you take away that whole super high lift with heavy things, that can be super easy to change. Also, I find a lot of workstations, especially if they're older and, no one's really looked at them in a while, it can be as simple as, something was originally placed on the back of the workstation just because that's where it got set. But there's space in the front of the workstation. If we move it closer, again, low to no cost, and it reduces or removes that awkward posture involved in interacting with that object. Yes, frequency in terms of taking job rotation, taking breaks, things like that. It's great administrative control if that's all you have left. I do personally, because it's kind of behavioral based in those instances, I do say, human behavior is hard to enforce unless you're engineering or designing it so that they have to take those breaks. So if that's all you can do, it's better than nothing. People feel better. Again, it helps with that retention and engagement. But trying wherever you can to kind of push for those engineering improvements, if you think about kind of hierarchy of controls, is going to get you kind of the most benefit. But I always focus in on anything that's high force. Like if I can remove a high force or reduce a high force, that's, gold star for the day. Did great.
Thank you, Rachel.
Of course.
Only other question I could possibly think of right now is I noticed that as I tour different facilities, a lot of warehouses, manufacturing businesses, things like that, a lot of employers forget about office ergonomics. And
Yeah.
you probably see that quite a bit.
Yeah, I do. Office ergonomics is one of those ones that honestly, it's a matter of getting the setup right, because it's not as complicated as non-office ergonomics, right? I'm not dealing with vibration welders that have been around for 30 years and still function, so therefore they're not changing. Or warehousing where you have big pallets that have to get moved somehow. Office ergonomics usually comes down to, making sure people have a chair that's proper and for them, if they do a lot of computer work, making sure that it's not on a laptop, or if they have to be on a laptop, that they have a secondary monitor so they're not doing the whole looking down all day kind of thing. And then it becomes equipment based of, getting the right mouse. So we generally recommend, an angled mouse that can help take some pressure off your, the carpal tunnel, things like that. Also, it becomes a little bit more behavioral too, right? So one of the things that comes up more and more, as I think a greater percentage of our population ends up being nearsighted earlier and earlier on in life, staring at screens for an extended period of time is not great for the eyes, right? So we kind of recommend the 20-20-20 rule, which is, every 20 minutes, look 20 feet away and focus for 20 seconds. It's super, it seems so simple. And then, you try and set a timer for 20 minutes and you realize, oh, this is a lot. I definitely don't do this. But it's really important for your eyes. Their muscles too, they can be overworked and strained, and you definitely don't want the results of that. The other one that I really like to encourage, so obviously standing for long periods of time isn't great. Sitting for long periods of time isn't great. Most people don't have or can't afford like a sit stand changeable desk, even though obviously those are the gold standard. But one of the things I really like is if you can get, a water bottle or something that you're going to finish within, 2 hours. And then that will tell you, oh, hey, it's been about 2 hours. I need to get up, walk around, refill my water bottle. Because obviously hydration is another really key factor in that. The body needs water to flush out all of the off products from energy generation and function. So, get your hydration in, get some extra movement in. And it's just about not, trying to manage how long you're spending in any one position.
Great advice, Rachel. Thank you.
Of course.
Nicole, any other questions?
We do not have any other questions, but obviously if you do come across any in the near future, just reach out to Rachel, Dina, or myself, and we can get it in the right hands.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess then I'll turn it back over to you, Nicole.
Oops. That's not fun. This is just Dina and myself, our contact information. So like I said, if you guys do come across any questions, just feel free to reach out. But I do want to take the time to just thank Rachel for her time and her expertise today and for everything that you do. We so greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day and joining us. But otherwise, I appreciate the rest of you all for joining us, and we will hopefully see you again in July.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me.